When it comes to gaming, the setting of Canada feels a little under-celebrated. I mean, yeah, the winters are a frigid tundra and the summers are hot enough to roast you alive, but such a hazardous setting would be great for all sorts of games. I recently had the pleasure of playing one of the only games I can think of that's not only set in Canada, but also influenced by Canadian culture and folklore, and that would be Sang-Froid, Tales of Werewolves. And what a fantastic game it is, the one that has been woefully unsung in the indie game mindspace since its release back in 2013. However, as of 2017, this game is now free. Sang-Froid is an incredible mix of tower defense, strategy, and third-person action, and it's undoubtedly one of the best games you've never played. The game is set in the 19th century Canadian wilderness as two brothers, Joseph and Jacques, try to protect and cure their sister whom is possessed by folkloric entities, though mainly werewolves. You can choose to play as either of the brothers, but playing as Joseph is easier, while playing as Jacques is considered hard mode. This seems as though it's mainly due to the fact that Joseph is burlier and has more hit points, whereas Jacques has much less and thus must focus more on traps. Gameplay consists of two phases, planning and execution/survival. The first phase, which is the planning phase, takes place during the day, and it consists of placing traps, visiting the town or Amerindian settlement to make purchases, investing skill points, and configuring your inventory. The player can only lay so many traps down during this phase, as each trap costs varying amounts of action points. After the traps are laid, spare action points can be converted into cash by chopping wood. The execution phase happens at night when the waves of mythical creatures attack your lone cabin. You take control of your chosen brother in third-person mode, equipped with an axe and a rifle, ready to see through the execution of traps and strategies decided during the day. Each day and night cycle is one chapter. These are represented by days on a calendar. There are about 18 in total. Overall, the game offers about 10 to 12 hours of gameplay in one playthrough. Now, the relationship between the planning phase and the execution phase is absolutely brilliant. Most of the traps laid in the day phase, for instance, require an action from the player during the night phase to activate or use them. Perhaps the most interesting is the hanging net trap. But instead of explaining it to you myself, here's how it's explained to you in the game. Now listen to this and tell me that this guy doesn't sound like Leonard Nimoy.
The hanging net. The number above the net represents the amount of enemies underneath your trap. All you have to do is aim and shoot the net to bring it down on your enemies.
It's a really minor thing, but it sounds like all the tutorials are being explained to you by Spock, and it's pretty amusing. But as I was saying, there's a lot of tension caused in the relationship between the planning phase and the execution phase. One has to consider exactly how much money and action points to spend setting up traps during the day, versus what they think they can risk taking on in a fight during the night. Since Joseph has much more health, there's simply more room for error, as leftover enemies are easily mopped up with the axe. Jacques, on the other hand, being more frail, has to plan more and requires more strategical skill and more combat skill, as he's not nearly as durable as Joseph. This hybrid game design is very well done. It's a gem of innovation as far as I'm concerned. But of course, it's not perfect. There is a lot of room for improvement. The third-person action gameplay is rather lackluster in terms of combat mechanics. It feels kinda clunky, and unlike a similar game called Hand of Fate, there is no attempt at mimicking the free-flow combat system made famous by Arkham Asylum. As the game progresses, more traps are added to the arsenal available during the planning phases. Unfortunately, some of the traps acquired later on in the game are so powerful that there's almost no reason to use some of the earlier ones. I found my beloved hanging net trap to be usurped by the likes of the exploding barrel, spike trap, and mortar. But despite some of these flaws, the game does a good job at letting you survive in the way that you want. It features a sizable skill tree, identical for each brother, that allows the player to specialize in a certain style of play. Perhaps the easiest style of play is investing cash into weapons and points into melee abilities, using Joseph to brute force your way through the game. For me, the game is at its best when playing as Jacques and specializing in trapping. There is also a sniper style of play, which focuses on rifles, fast reload speeds, and hiding in watchtowers. It's astonishing how many different ways the waves of enemies can be defeated by the plethora of traps and strategies. But this variety is curbed by the need for efficiency. Using less traps means having more spare action points to convert into cash. The gameplay is accompanied by a stellar original soundtrack that I found myself humming an alarming number of times. The music is very folk-heavy, with strings and traditional percussion instruments taking up the bulk of the focus. The intro loading screen, which features the first music you hear when you boot up the game, features a traditional French-Canadian style of music known as rire la bouche. This style of music is notable for its attempt at mimicking the sound of folk instruments, such as the fiddle or accordion, with the mouth. Even the developer's logo screen at the beginning of the game is brilliant. Check this out. Even if you don't play the game, the soundtrack alone is worthy of your time. The voice acting in this game ranges from decent to comical. It's certainly not one of its strengths. The dialogue is in English, but you can hear a lot of French-Canadian accents in the mix as well, which adds a touch of authenticity.
Hey! Look at the beautiful black stallion standing in front of your place, Jackie. A far cry from that broken down old mare you had, I tell you.
Hi there, fellas. Good news! I ran into a doctor who was heading to the village to relieve Dr. Lamontagne. I told him about Josephine's illness, and he suggested going to see him right away, for free!
Gentlemen, I've examined your sister, and it's imperative that she go with me to the village.
In terms of the art design and graphics, everything is decent. Nothing special, but certainly not bad by any means. The three-dimensional graphics during the night phases, as well as the cutscenes, are probably the weakest part of the games in terms of its graphical fidelity. Most of the cutscenes take place between chapters to set up the story, and they aren't great. The character models are just sort of thrust into the frame as a text box scrolls beneath them. The cutscenes, the graphics, and the voice acting are all constant reminders that this is not a AAA release, but considering it's an indie game, the package as a whole is definitely above average in terms of presentation, and the sound design and music in particular are its crown jewels. The innovative gameplay more than makes up for its presentational shortcomings. Considering this game came out quite a few years ago, some of you may be wondering why there haven't been any sequels. I mean, the game's full title is Sang-Froid, Tales of Werewolves, Tome 1, which sets itself up to be part of a series. Unfortunately, Artifice Studios went in another direction for their sophomore effort with the strategy title Conflicts: Revolutionary Space Battles. And though I haven't played this title, it does seem well received on Steam. That being said, I can only hope that Artifice Studios has something in mind for the future of Sang-Froid. You can download Sang-Froid on Steam right now, and you should, because it's amazing. And of course, now that the game is free, the only loonies and toonies you'll be spending will be at the Wolvesvale Saloon, deciding between eau de vie and bagos. Thanks for watching. And if you like what we do here, please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/losereviews.